She didn't fly to fight. She flew to save lives. But on one afternoon in Afghanistan, 2009, a rescue mission turned into a battle for survival for her crew, her patients, and herself. When enemy fire tore through her helicopter, she didn't run. She picked up her rifle, returned fire, and called in the rescue that saved them all. This is the story of Major Mary Jennings Hegar, the Dustoff pilot who went down behind enemy lines and refused to stay down. Before we start the story of a hero, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Making of a Pilot. Mary Jennings Hegar never fit the mold of what people thought a pilot looked like. She was 5'4", with sharp eyes and a quiet voice, but behind that calm was the kind of resolve you only find in people who've already fought their own battles. She grew up in Texas, in a home where courage and chaos often collided. Her father was abusive. At 8 years old, she saw her mother pack their bags and flee in the middle of the night. That moment, she would later say, taught her two things: fear and how to never be ruled by it again. As a teenager, she was drawn to the sky, air shows, helicopters, the thunder of engines. She said flying made her feel free of everything that ever tried to hold me down. When she joined the U.S. Air Force after college, it wasn't about rebellion, it was about control. She wanted to take her life into her own hands, literally. Training wasn't easy. The Air Force had few women in combat-adjacent roles, and fewer still in search and rescue. But Mary excelled not because she was fearless, but because she was relentless. Instructors called her a natural. Her classmates called her MJ. When she earned her combat search and rescue wings, she taped a note inside her locker that said, "If I can save one life, it's all worth it." She served first in Iraq, flying wounded soldiers out of combat zones under heavy fire. But it was in Afghanistan that her story would reach its defining moment. By 2009, MJ had flown hundreds of missions. Every one of them carried risk, but the call that came that July felt different. An urgent extraction, multiple wounded, hostile territory. As she prepared her HH-60 Pavehawk helicopter for takeoff, she looked at her crew and said, "We were bringing everyone home." She didn't know then that by sunset she'd be fighting for her own life and proving what it truly means to never quit. Chapter 2. The Mission, July 29, 2009. The sun was blazing over Afghanistan's Kunar province, the mountains jagged like blades, the valleys alive with radio static and danger. Major Mary Jennings Hegar, then a captain, sat in the cockpit of her HH-60G Pavehawk, call sign Pedro 15. Her mission was simple on paper: medevac pickup of U.S. troops under fire. But in Afghanistan, nothing was ever simple. From the moment they lifted off, she felt it, the tension in the air, that sixth sense pilots get after too many close calls. Her co-pilot glanced over. "You good, MJ?" She nodded. Always. As they neared the landing zone, the radio came alive. "Troops in contact. We've got multiple wounded. RPG fire from the ridge." Hegar's pulse quickened. She banked hard left, guiding the chopper between canyon walls. Below, she could see flashes of gunfire, dust clouds rising where rounds hit the dirt. The Pavehawk descended through the chaos, her crew chief, Technical Sarge Dave Callahan, hanging half out the door, scanning for hostiles. The ramp opened. The smell of smoke and cordite rushed in. The ground team was pinned down. Hegar maneuvered with surgical precision, keeping the rotors clear while her crew loaded the wounded. Rounds clanged against the fuselage. One round shattered the windshield. Another tore through her shoulder armor plate, grazing her skin. She winced, but didn't flinch. "We've got them," her flight engineer yelled, pulling up. As they lifted off, the sky lit up with RPG trails. Hagar's instincts screamed. She pushed the collective forward too late. A rocket slammed into the tail. The helicopter lurched violently, spinning as alarms blared. Hydraulics failed. They were going down. "Brace! Brace!" The Pave Hawk hit the ground, hard metal twisting, glass shattering, sand exploding in all directions. Inside, chaos. But everyone was still alive. Barely. Her head was ringing. Her right arm was bleeding. But Hagar's first thought wasn't herself, it was the wounded in the back. She crawled to the door, rifle in hand, scanning for movement. Gunfire erupted again, this time from just beyond the ridge. They were surrounded. "We need air support now," she shouted into the radio. "Pedro 15 is down, repeat. We are down." Then she looked at her crew, her patients, and the wrecked helicopter. Her voice went calm. "Nobody dies here today. Not if I can help it." And with that, the Dustoff pilot became a soldier on the ground, fighting to save every life she'd come to rescue. Chapter 3. The Fall and the Fight. The world had gone silent for a moment after impact, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. Major Mary Jennings Hegar blinked against the dust, her ears ringing, her vision blurred from the hit. The helicopter lay tilted on its side, the rotor blades twisted and still. She felt blood dripping down her arm, but all she could think about was the crew. Callahan. Dan. "We were good," someone shouted back. Two wounded soldiers in the back groaned in pain. The smell of leaking fuel filled the cabin. They had seconds. Hegar ripped off her harness, crawled toward the ramp, and kicked it open. A blast of hot air hit her face, followed by the crack of rifle fire. Bullets tore into the dirt just meters away. They were surrounded. "We've got movement 12 o'clock on the ridge," Callahan yelled. Hegar grabbed her M4 rifle and returned fire from the wreck. For the first time in her career, she wasn't flying over the fight. She was the fight. The men she'd come to rescue were barely conscious. Her own crew was wounded, and still she refused to let panic in. "We hold this bird until we get the call," she said, calm but sharp. "Nobody leaves anyone behind." Rounds pinged off the fuselage. Shrapnel sliced her helmet. She pressed the radio again. "This is Pedro 15. We are down. Taking fire. Request immediate extraction." The minutes stretched into hours. Every sound of approaching engines felt like hope until it wasn't tea. Finally, the distant rumble of A-10 Warthogs broke through the noise. Air support had arrived. The jets strafed the ridge, smoke blooming across the valley. Amid the chaos, another helicopter, Pedro 16, roared into view, but it couldn't land. The area was too hot. They'd have to move. "We're on foot," Hegar said into the mic, gripping her rifle. "We're bringing our wounded to you." With one arm bandaged and her uniform burned, she helped carry the stretcher through open ground, firing bursts between steps. She refused to let go. When they finally reached the rescue chopper, she pushed the last man aboard before climbing in herself. Her arms trembled. Her body was wrecked. But she smiled faintly. "Everyone else accounted for," she said. And as the helicopter lifted off, as the wreckage of Pedro 15 shrank below, she exhaled for the first time in hours. She had flown into hell to save lives, and somehow she'd brought them all back. Chapter 4. The Wounds That Followed. When she finally returned home, Mary Jennings Hegar looked fine from the outside. Her wounds had been stitched, her burns were healing, her flight suit was replaced by a hospital gown. But inside, the war hadn't left her, it had simply changed shape. For weeks she woke in the middle of the night to the sound of phantom rotors. She could still hear the alarms, feel the helicopter shaking beneath her hands. Sometimes she reached for her rifle in the dark before realizing she was home. She told herself it was normal, that she could handle it because she always had. But it wasn't just the nightmares. It was the quiet, the absence of the radio calls, of the crew-s voices, of the chaos that had defined her purpose. The Air Force grounded her during recovery. They said she needed time to heal. She hated it. Flying wasn't just her job, it was the one place she felt weightless, where the world made sense. Worse yet, she soon learned that she couldn't return to the same missions. Despite her record dozens of rescues, a distinguished Flying Cross with valor, she was still bound by the military's combat exclusion policy, which barred women from officially serving in combat roles. The irony burned. She had been shot at, wounded, and nearly killed in combat, but officially she was considered a combat veteran. "You're telling me I fought the enemy, got shot down, and that doesn't account?" she asked her superior. The answer was bureaucratic silence. So, she decided to fight again, just on a different battlefield. She joined forces with other female service members to challenge the Pentagon's gender ban. They filed a lawsuit, not out of anger, but out of loyalty to the women already risking their lives without recognition. During interviews, she often said, "This isn't about me wanting to be in combat. It's about the truth that women already are." Each hearing, each article, each question brought the war back, but she stood firm, not as a pilot this time, but as a voice. Because the same courage that made her land a crippled helicopter under fire was the same courage that made her stand in front of the system and say, "We've earned our place. We've already proven it." And once again, she refused to back down. Chapter 5. The Legacy of the Dustoff Pilot. By 2013, Major Mary Jennings Hegar had traded the sound of rotors for the silence of committee rooms and interviews. She still carried shrapnel scars on her arm, tiny silver reminders of the day Pedro 15 fell, but now her fight was political, not physical. The lawsuit she helped lead, Hegar versus Panetta, reached the highest levels of the Pentagon. It challenged the decades-old combat exclusion policy, which barred women from infantry and frontline combat positions. For years, the rule had been justified as protection. Mary called it what it was, a lie built on fear. "We've already been fighting. We just weren't supposed to talk about it," she said in one of her speeches. In 2013, the ban was finally lifted. For the first time in American history, women could officially serve and die in combat. It didn't happen overnight. But Mary's name was on the paperwork that cracked the wall. She later wrote a book called Shoot Like a Girl. It wasn't about politics. It was about people, the pilots, medics, and soldiers she'd flown with, and the moment when everything she believed in was tested. The book became a bestseller, and soon Hollywood came calling. But even as producers fought for the rights, Mary stayed grounded, a mother now, raising her children in Texas, teaching them the same thing her own mother taught her all those years ago. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It as the decision to keep moving through it. She never forgot Afghanistan, the dust, the noise, the smell of burning metal. But she also never forgot the faces she saved. The soldier she pulled from the wreckage who still sends her a Christmas card every year. The crew that still calls her boss, even though none of them wear the uniform anymore. When asked if she missed flying, she smiled softly. Every day. But I didn't stop being a pilot. I just started flying a different kind of mission. Today, her medals sit in a glass case, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Purple Heart, but the real legacy of Mary Jennings Hegar isn't a medal. It's motion. Because every time a young woman steps into a cockpit, every time a soldier calls a female commander "Ma'am" without hesitation, a piece of her fight lives on. And the Dustoff pilot who once fell from the sky rose higher than ever. Epilogue. Never came home. She didn't die on that mountainside in Afghanistan, but a part of her never left it. Major Mary Jennings Hegar brought her crew home that day, but the war stayed with her in her scars, in her silence, in the lessons she refused to forget. She never came home the same, and maybe that's what courage really is, not just surviving the fall, but choosing to rise again. For every woman who ever dreamed of serving, for every soldier who wondered if they belonged, Mary's story became a signal flare, a reminder that bravery doesn't care about gender, rank, or expectation. She flew into war to save others. She came back to change the system that once tried to limit her, and though she never returned to the cockpit, her mission never ended. Because courage doesn't stop when the rotors do. It echoes in the skies she once flew, and in the hearts of those who finally have the chance to follow her flight path. She never came home. She became home for everyone still fighting to be seen. Stay healthy. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. And if you have an idea for another untold story, share it in the comments. Your voice helps keep their memory alive.